Okay, so this week it looks like we're talking about change, change management, why people resist change, and then what can we do about it. So before I go into any of that detail, especially with my example of my organization, we first need to define change. What is change? And our book actually doesn't really give a definition of it. We could change our clothes. That's interesting. Or change. It's something that you receive when you give somebody cash. You give them too much money, right? I in these cases, this is not the kind of change we're talking about. The change we're talking about is when something is altered or modified or becomes different. So when any part of your organization is converted from one state to another, that's the kind of change that we're talking about. I know I'm being a bit cheeky, but that just want to be clear. It's any kind of. It could be as simple as your pens, right? You like gel pens, let's say, but they want to switch to ballpoint pens. And honestly, that I like gel pens too. I can understand that and why there would be resistance to that. But ballpoint pens are cheaper. They're easier to produce. Gel pens are expensive. But that is an example of change. But let's just run with that real quick and explain why people might resist that kind of change. So, our book says that we should use the Mars model to see why people might resist that change. And so, the Mars model tells us that there are a few things that would stop us from, accepting that change. And that would either be motivation, which is the M, ability, which is the A, role clarity, which I'm not going to keep spelling this, and then situational support. That is the Mars model. So those are the four reasons of why somebody might resist change in an organization. So, for example, with our pen example, right? If we have gel pens, right, and we're switching to ballpoint pens, what is the role of that change? Why are we doing that change? That might be role clarity. Or what is your role in it? Why do I have to change pens, right? And those are all things that cause conflict. Or motivation, why do we even need to change them? If pens are only 2% of the budget, what what's the difference, right? But let me put it this way is would you rather cut 2% of your office supplies budget or would you rather cut out a 2% raise for the organization, right? It's about putting it in perspective. But in any case, the reason that people resist change, at least according to this Mars model, the six most common things that we get and that our book says is that they have a negative valence of change, they fear the unknown, they have the not invented here syndrome, they are breaking routines, or they believe incongruent team dynamics or incongruent organizational systems and structures are happening. So, for example, with pens, let's just say you've never used a ballpoint pen, right? You've only known gel pen. That's the fear of the unknown. Or not invented here. Well, marketing is telling us to, at least in this example, marketing is telling us, oh, hey, or finance is telling us, hey, these ballpoint pens are so much nicer. We can get them custom printed with our logo, or they're just cheaper. It's all good. But then you would be like, well, I use a pen every day. What does marketing or finance know? They use a spreadsheet, for example. And so those are the type of syndromes. But I will only be focusing on one. But those are just a brief overview of those six that are most commonly cited. Now, as I had mentioned before, I am a contractor for Solvay. So I'm actually employed by Kelly Services. So I am a functional consultant essentially, right? So my job is an inventory or supply chain planner, and Kelly Services assigns me to clients as needed, right? So Solvay said, hey, this is the expert, this is our problem, this is the expertise we need. Do you have somebody? And Kelly Services goes, yeah, we have somebody for that, or no, we don't have somebody, but we'll go find somebody. And so Kelly Services went out, found me, and then they said, hey, Solvay needs your expertise in this specific area, and you will help them complete this project. You will help them guide them through this, manage all the change, all the projects, and they will give you the resources for it. So my job is all about this. And my current, project that I'm on assigned with Solvay is a supply chain overhaul. So we're doing a whole entire lean inventory system and is implementing those Six Sigma ideas. I don't want to go too much into it because we're just getting off topic. But my job is to implement change. So I have seen many of these resistances at every level. That pen example is a real thing that I have actually seen, right now with my current project. But I think I want to say the most common thing that I have seen, at least with my current project, is that most people have a fear of the unknown. So management especially, it's there's a it's hard to explain, but there is a sort of what do they call it? Mental incongruity. There's a cognitive dissonance between what someone knows is right and then what they actually do. And so that, I mean, that's both fear of the unknown, but also breaking routines, right? So those two kind of have some interplay. But really, it's mostly fear of the unknown of saying, hey, I've seen this or I know this will work, but will it work here? I don't know, you know. And they feel like their current system works well enough, you know, and they just feel like they're losing control in a new system. And so that is, I mean, at the heart of it, that is the fear of the unknown. And I think that's what I see most commonly when I go to implement something. It's typically not it's typically not breaking routines or the team dynamics or the organizational systems. Uh, at least from my perspective as a consultant, generally this a part of this is because that Kelly services, you know, when you do this for a long time, they have systems in place to address those. But it's up to the individual assigned consultant to assuage the fears of the unknown, and that is really really difficult, right? So, I mean, just to address that, right? You know, how do we fix that? Uh, and that is, I would say, to fix that one, fear of the unknown, it's all about communication, right? And now the book lists a couple of different ways that we could, you know, address these concerns, but I would say the strongest one is communication, at least in my opinion. I have found that if you implement communication systems, so like when I took project management, or as I'm taking project management, and I'm sure that many of you have, we learn about project communication systems, right? So when you do these projects, everybody, and I mean everybody that's affected, should have a voice and should be felt like they're heard, right? And I almost go to the length to say don't anonymize it, right? Because people feel like they should have their individual voices heard rather than just be, oh, you know, I'm just another employee. What do they care? Right? I see that one a lot. So developing these communication systems, it's just, I mean, it does take a lot of time and it really does set back your project. And I mean, the book does list that as the problem is that it's time consuming and potentially very costly. And so I can give plenty of examples of it being time consuming and costly. I mean, I am scheduled to work 40 hours a week, but when these projects, you know, when everything is being executed, I typically work 50 to 60 hours a week, which is tough, you know. So I spread it out over Monday through Saturday. But that is time consuming, and then it's also costly. Not only my overtime, but the fact that you're going to make mistakes, especially if you once you give those people a voice, you cannot take it back. You cannot take somebody's voice away once you've given them a voice. So, for example, I have asked the union guys, "Hey, what do you think of this shelf, or what do you think of this layout, this planogram, right?" And they say, "Well, we don't like it like that," you know, and that makes sense, right? Because they're the ones using it, you know. They say, "Hey, these hex nuts here, these 5/8 washers. These should go at the top of the rack so we don't have to bend over to grab them because we use them all the time." And that is a totally fair, you know, communication that I should know and that I want to know as a consultant because I want to make as many people as happy as possible. Because management's concern is only, oh, hey, we just want to keep less of these in stock. We want to make sure that we can increase their wrench time. So how do we do that? And so I work with both parties and assure that it, you know, works on both ends. But that in itself is very, very time consuming, and I have made many mistakes where not only will I lay out the planogram where the 5/8 washers or whatever is used most frequently is down at the bottom, so they have to bend over to get it, and then they make a complaint and say, okay, well, now my back hurts, right? And so let's bring it to union management, and then union management gets involved, and then management is on me, right? So yes, it is costly, it's time consuming, but generally I find that it's worth it. At least in what I do, if you do it all the time, it is definitely worth it. I know for a lot of organizations, a lot of people with change, I would say it's probably not worth the effort uh, to my extent. I think it is probably what solves the majority of issues is if you were able to reframe and communicate that issue, that problem, that reframing into a way that they understand, most people will not only feel less afraid of the change, but they'll also understand it. They'll be willing to break their routines, or they'll see how it works into their routine, and they'll say, hey, that is way easier for me. I like that. I want this to happen. And so it does address parts of the Mars model that would stop them from changing. So, like their motivation, you know, like if I said, oh, I'll give you 10, I don't know, ballpoint pens for one gel pen, right? Because they're 80% of the cost, right? So if you lose your pens, you're free to grab as many as you want. People might be like, oh, you know what? I lose pens all the time. So of course I'm going to take it. I want that. That motivates me. That's my negotiation. But it's also communication, right? Negotiation, as it lists in the book, is just communication. But I'm already 10, 11 minutes, so I think that's about everything that I have. That's my own personal experience, but I could go on about this forever. So yeah, thanks for watching and listening.